Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Today I'm going to talk about the inconsistency in the arguments given by atheists. Now, I'm going to talk about 15 different arguments. Okay, I'm going to give about 15 different arguments, and I want you to rate, because this is something every Muslim should understand deeply and think about deeply and realize deeply. And you know what happens with arguments? Some arguments hit some people and some arguments hit other people, depending upon their nature, depending upon their personality. So I am going to present to you about 15 different arguments, and I will give the details of these arguments in separate lectures. I'm only going to mention things quickly over here, but I'm going to give you the aggregate. I'm going to give you the combination of about 15, you could say, very, very strong Quranic arguments regarding the issue of the existence of God. Okay? Now, I'm going to start off with the philosophical argument. So this is the first one. And so what I want you to do in the comments section is, number one, you should go through this lecture of mine with your kids. You should go through it with your even professors, write a paper, using this, writing paper, doing more research, you know. This needs to be clear, okay? So, argument number one is a philosophical argument. Those of you who are familiar with philosophy will like this. Those of you who are not familiar with philosophy and philosophical thought may find this crude, or just like, what's the point of saying that? But if you follow along, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to talk about this in a way that even the average person can understand. Now, just for the people that have studied a philosophy, I'm going to say only this sentence. This is an argument regarding epistemology and how this argument shows you that there is almost an episticide. Now, what I mean by episticide is that you're doing a suicide of an epistemology but if you accept your arguments as ultimate truths. Now, what do I mean by that? You see, and this is now I'm making it simple. You see that if you say that the only knowledge is the knowledge that the five senses can attest to. So only what I see is real, only what I hear is real, only what I can test in the lab is real. If I can measure it, it's real. Otherwise, seeing is believing. Otherwise, if I can't see it, it's not real. On the one side, you'll say this, that the only knowledge that's real is the one that can be detected by the five senses. On the other side, you will say that we came into existence by mistake. We are a series of accidents. Now, the contradiction is here. You're going to say that a series of accidents led us to the five senses that are going to be the determinators, the judge of what is knowledge and what is not knowledge. How can a series of accidents lead us to have the senses to be able to tell what is real and what is not real? And so therefore, if you say, I will only believe in what I can see, but what my eyes see is just a mere series of accidents, but I'm going to say this is the ultimate way of knowing something. Do you see the contradiction here? Now, this is why I say this is an episticide. This is a suicide of an epistemology. On the one side, you'll say, oh, we're just the result of accidents. But even though my eyes and my ears and my five senses are a result of that accidents, but I'm only going to believe what I see and what I hear and what I feel and what I touch and what I can measure. The contradiction there is a philosophical contradiction. Argument number two, same thing. It is an episticide. It is, on the one side, but this is not really an epistemological argument. This in philosophy would be called an ontological argument. So you can say it is a suicide of the ontology of the argument. Okay, and that is, you say, why is there evil in the world, right? And you say that because why? Because you want good in the world, and you say, well, if there is God and God is good, then there should be good in the world. Good things should happen to good people. Bad things should happen to bad people. That's the fair thing. Why do bad things happen to good people? The problem is exactly that what you are starting, your very premises, that your premises that you're starting the argument becomes defunct. When you make that argument and say that therefore there's no God. Because you start your argument by saying, if there's God, then God is good, and then why is bad things happening? Therefore, there is not God. Right? Because good things are not happening to good people, and bad things are not happening to bad people, and because God should be good, and because God is not, God is not good, therefore God doesn't exist. That's the first contradiction. Because God is not good as you think, therefore God should not exist. Number two, the argument is, the very argument you start out to make, that there is good and there's bad, you end up destroying because you end up saying that there is no God. You see, communism, and you have to understand this, communism was an idea of saying there's no God, and because there's no God, we have to make everything equal. So if there's a doctor, he should get the same pay as a bike rider, and everything should be just equal. Because the argument of going against God partly has to do with, well, you know, God's not going to do justice to us. We have to do justice to ourselves. This is what it ended up being in the early 1900s. Okay, and so communism came along. Communism said opium is religion is the opium of the masses, etc., etc. And so the result is that even though we want right and wrong, but we will ultimately destroy the idea of right and wrong, because now there's no right and wrong. So you're starting with an argument, God should be right and wrong, and then you're saying, well, because there's no God, there's no right and wrong. And if there was a God, there should be good only to good people and bad only to bad people. The contradiction there is obvious, right? The contradiction is at two levels. And so the first level that the contradiction is that you start off your premises by saying there's good and bad, and you end your premises by saying, therefore, there's no good and bad. Okay? Because God is good and he should do good, but since God's not there, therefore, there's no good and bad. So your premises is debunked by your conclusion over there, right? Okay. Third is the father and son, which leads to this. So this is the third argument. And that is, you know, the attitude of the people who say that, the attitude of the people that say there is no God is very much like the son. You know, if the son says to the father, I want a car. The father says, no, you're not going to get a car. The son says, oh, you're not my dad. You're not my father. Right? That's kind of like essentially what we're doing at a psychological level. You know, God doesn't give us what we want, and the world isn't the way we'd like it, and so therefore we say, you're not God. But we actually don't prove that he's not God. We spend our time telling ourselves and others that he's not God, that there is no God, almost like a son's angry with the dad. Because all the arguments are about how God isn't fair, and how God isn't doing things the way I want it. And so that is the contradiction there. And then, you know, the fourth argument now, and this is a very Quranic argument, is that if a man goes into a palace, or before even that, if that is that the universe and the earth is designed to serve man. The earth is designed to serve man. What are all the fruits coming out for? You know, what are all the beautiful flowers coming out for? What is, you know, the winds move and the rain goes in the different parts of the world so that man will ultimately be able to eat, right? And what about the iron and the ore and the oil and the minerals and the copper, and all of that comes out to whose benefit? It just so happens that, you know, the sunlight hits the trees and then we break the trees and we can put it into fire, and that the energy that's stored in the wood through the heat, then we burn that and now we have fire. It just so happens we have domesticated animals. It just so happens that you can, carve out a boat with wood and put it on the water and it doesn't sink. All of these things attest to the fact that it's almost the earth is like a palace. And you're like in the palace, right? And everything in the palace is there to help you along. Okay, your room has been set, your food has been set, the table is set for you, everything is set for you, and you're like, I don't think anyone owns this palace. I don't think anyone owns this palace. I don't really see anyone helping me out either here. And all these things are just helping you out. Okay, so that's another argument. So that's argument number 4. Argument number 5 is the hospital. You say, it's like going into a hospital and saying in the hospital, oh, so many people are dying here. There's just diseases here. All there is a disease. I just see people dying. There's so much suffering here. You don't see the side where there's cure, where people are being helped, where there are nurses, where there are doctors. You don't see that side. You only see the side where people are suffering. You only see the side where people are dying. It's our example of being in this world. Just the fact that for every disease there's a cure, that should lead us to, and that, the cure is coming, all these flowers and all these fruits and all these spices, all coming out to help, vitamin C, vitamin D, and so on, all this coming out from the earth for what? And you're in the hospital and you're like, oh, I just think that this hospital is made to kill us. And therefore, God is bad. You see? So that's kind of like how this goes. There's a 6th argument. And remember, all of these arguments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want you to rate them on 1 to 10. 1 to 10 in the comment section. Then I want you to comment on which argument do you think was strong. Which argument do you think hits your heart the most? And which argument do you think, or do you have other arguments? I'd like to know. Now, the next argument is the argument of kalam. Okay? And the argument of kalam is that, hey, look, does the universe have a beginning? Because if the universe has a beginning, then there is a God. Because it had a beginning. Anything that has a beginning has to have a creator. And if the universe has a beginning, then there is a creator. And we know that, I think now we say, what, is it 14 billion years ago that the Big Bang happened? And therefore, if there's a beginning, then there's God. See, when we didn't know about the Big Bang, until then, and especially in paganism, the concept was, okay, there are gods, many gods, and there's madda, materialism, material world. This material world's been here forever, God has been here forever. Okay, so this was the concept. But when science came along, it made a very radical move. Something very radical was discovered, which is that this universe has a beginning, which is what the Quran also tells us. The Quran tells us the universe has a beginning. Okay? Now, argument number 7, which is my version of the clock design. Look, if there is a clock, right, take any clock. Now remember, all of these I want you to rate in your mind or on a paper with your child, with your son, with your teenager, with your wife, whoever, or someone you're doing da'wah to, or an atheist you're talking to. Rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay? And then the clock design argument is more like this, and this is my version of it, which is that if you can take out the pieces of the clock and they all fit one another. All the pieces, they fit one another. If all the pieces fit one another, then I would say then somebody designed it. If they don't fit one another, if the pieces don't fit, then maybe it was an accident, maybe. But if the clock pieces fit together, then you have to say, wait, the clock pieces fit together. And so therefore, there has to be a designer. Okay? That's the argument of the clock. Now, that leads us to argument number 8. Argument number 8 is, if this universe was random, then knowledge would be random. We couldn't make a periodical table. If things were not organized, if things were random, if things were just by chance, then there has to be something significantly there in the universe that we would say, look, this is random. The Quran points out to the harmony of the universe, not the randomness of the universe. And this is the point. That if you say there's no God, then there should be something random out there. Knowledge itself should be random. It would be impossible to make the periodical table. It would be impossible to organize species. It would be impossible to organize knowledge in any organized way, because everything would be random. There would be no sense to it. There would be no method to it. There would be no consistency to knowledge itself. And since knowledge is not random, and since knowledge is organized, and we organize knowledge based upon the five senses we have, right? So therefore, since we're able to organize the knowledge, therefore there has to be some organizing force behind all knowledge. Okay? So that was number 8. Number 9, laws of nature. Does nature, what we call nature, does nature or creation have laws? You know, everything is designed with, like gravity is a law of nature, right? There's laws of nature. There's laws of motion, laws of the moving of the sun and the gravity and the electromagnetic fields and all these different, like light, right? Moves with a certain law at a certain speed. It doesn't ever disobey the law that it has. So if the universe is moving according to laws, if the universe is moving according to fixed laws, consistent laws, if the universe is moving according to a fixed set of laws, then you have to say that there has to be intelligence behind it, not something blind behind it. So you can measure that on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you feel about that? Number 10 is interesting, because I'm going to mention number 10, and that is everything in nature. Okay, everything in nature. In fact, we will go ahead, and I'll show you this video maybe twice. Let me do it that way. I'll show you this video twice. Let us look at argument number 10, and that is that there is a mathematical sequencing in the universe, and that is like this.
Math wasn't made up to harass English majors. It was invented by a little something called nature, and it's everywhere you look. In fact, there are specific numbers that we see in nature all the time. Together, they're called the Fibonacci sequence, and it goes something like this: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55. You may know this pattern. The first and the second add up to the third, and the second and the third add up to the fourth, and the fourth and the fifth add up to the sixth, and so on. The sequence was first described by mathematicians in India about 1300 years ago, and it was introduced to the West in 1202 by Leonardo of Pisa, aka Fibonacci, who is also responsible for introducing Arabic numerals to Europe, which, yeah, if he hadn't done that, we'd still be counting in Roman numerals, which would be terrible. Fibonacci was a mathematician, and in his book Liber Abaci, he described this sequence with a thought experiments about a family of incestuous bunnies. If you put one boy bunny and one girl bunny together, that's 2, and those 2 together will make a third, and those 3, when they're done, taking turns, will make 5, etc. But the easiest place to find these numbers in nature isn't in bunnies, it's in plants. If you cut a banana into slices, you'll see that it has 3 distinct sections. An apple has 5. No matter what kind of flower you're looking at, chances are it has 3, 5, 8, 13, or 21 petals. Rows of seeds in sunflowers and pine cones always add up to Fibonacci numbers. Now, plants don't grow this way because they're receiving some kind of mysterious cosmic mandate. They're doing it because it's...
So that is the Fibonacci number argument, which leads to another argument, which is consistency of math. If the universe was random, there would be, just like if the universe was random, then knowledge would be random. If knowledge would be random, math would be random. So our argument number 11 is that because we live in a world where mathematics is organized and mathematics is consistent, therefore this universe comes from has an intelligence behind it, right? If the universe was not intelligent and things were random, then math would be random, everything would be random. And so knowledge would be random, math would be random. The fact that we can do mathematics, human beings use mathematics to design things, to make things, to organize things, to manufacture things. We use math for that because math is an inevitable, inescapable aspect of engines, everything. Chips, everything needs math to make it and to design it in an intelligent way. And if there's consistency in math, if there's consistency in numbers, then there has to be an intelligent being behind that. Otherwise, there would be no consistent math. Nothing would be consistent. The universe wouldn't be consistent. Okay, number 12. If I said to you that I'm going to give a monkey a typewriter and let the monkey type a book, and this is an argument of probability. So up till now, a lot of the arguments I was giving were philosophical, a little bit scientific when I talked about the beginning of the universe, but even that is more philosophical actually, because that's still an ontological argument. But now, let's talk about probabilities, and we're talking about math. So math is also, if you know about the classification of knowledge, math also comes within the realm of philosophy. You would be surprised to know math really doesn't come under the domain of science as much as it comes under the domain of philosophy. Okay? Anyway, so the argument is of probability. If I give a typewriter to a monkey and tell him to write. And so what happens? The argument is that probably he won't be able to write a book. Not forever. Not ever. The chances, this universe coming into the way it is, and being able to sustain life, and to be fine-tuned for life, and the way this universe is running, its probability is 100 million times more, harder, probability-wise, than it's easier to accept that a monkey wrote a book by mistake on a typewriter than to believe this universe probably just came into existence in the fashion, in the way that it's fine-tuned for life. Okay? Over here, I want to lead to another argument, which is the argument of going from simple to complex. See, things break down to simple. Okay? That's the world that we live in right now. I'll give you an example. You put a dead body into the grave, what happens? It's going to break down into its simple components, right? You leave something out, it'll rust and break down to its simple components. Everything is going to break down to its simple components. But for the making of this universe, what happened was, from the moment of the Big Bang, you had subatomic particles coming together as the atoms, and then atoms coming together as molecules, molecules coming together as from inorganic to organic life. And by the way, over here, this is another argument within this. So when the process is going from simple to complex, it's not like, I'll give you an example. If I throw dice, right, I throw dice 100 times, I can throw dice a billion infinite number of times, the result will always be the numbers in the dice. It will never happen even after an infinite number of times that I throw dice and the result is flowers. When things go from simple to complex, from subatomic particles to molecules to and then especially the biggest jump from non-living to living, from the inorganic to organic. When things make that big jump, it's more difficult than even flowers coming out of dice. Because the general way things are, things break from complex to simple. But we see in the making of the universe, it went in the opposite direction. Okay? And so, this is the argument of the typewriter, that it is very, 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 very improbable that we would have this universe and to be fine-tuned for life and fine-tuned for man and for the civilization of man and for the growth of man and for man to have discoveries and make things and make civilizations. This all could not just be probability-wise, it would just not be. Okay? Because according to science, we only needed to have survival of the fittest. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit when we bring in one of these people to talk, you'll see. Argument number 10, self-organization. The universe seems to have this kind of like system of organizing itself. We've already talked about this, but I mean this in a different way now. And that has to do with the very idea of Tawheed. You see, this atom has a nucleus in the center and atoms moving around it or randomly around it. You have the same thing in the living cell. You have the cell. You have the human mind. And then our body is serving, around. Our mind is the decision maker and everything is around it. You can also then see, for example, the solar system. You have the sun and the planets around it. You can see this in the galaxy level, where in the center of the galaxy is the black hole. So you find that the universe tends to make things, number one, in a spiral shape, which is very interesting. And number two, the universe tends to organize itself. The universe has an organizing phenomenon to it. The universe organizes itself. And to tell me that things just became organized at the solar level, at the subatomic particle level, at the atom level, at the human level, at the living level, everything just became organized just by itself, just by accident, through a random processes, through a blind process, through just mere chance. So this is, I would say, it is more logical, more easier to believe in God. It takes a lot less logic, and probability wise, it's easier to say there's a God, obviously, right? It's kind of like an Occam's razor thing. The simple answer is the true answer usually, right? So then to say, no, well, everything went against all the odds and everything went through, just mere chances and all this happened. It's just, so anyway, that's argument number 10. Argument number 11, design and beauty. See, survival of the fittest would have given you functionality, even if you accept, okay? It would have given you functionality. So you have function, like for example, a car. You have a car with an engine, a transmission, it has gas. But who's going to go out of their way in a blind process, right, to make things beautiful? To make beauty. Why does man make, animals don't decorate their food. Human beings decorate their food. Man looks at the sky and is in awe, right? We just love beauty. We're the ones who appreciate the beauty around us. A tree doesn't appreciate the beauty of itself. We are the ones who look at the flowers and say, wow, this is beautiful. So why is it that there is functionality with aesthetics? Like the Quran says, Al-Khaliq al-Bari al-Musawwir. He's the one who creates, and then he's the one who fashions it. It's, when we make a car, for example, we make the functionality of the car, right? And then we try to make it a beautiful design for that car. So when you look at the universe, and you're like looking at the functionality plus the beauty, and then you're also telling me, but this just happened by chance. Doesn't make sense to me. Now you tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think? Number 12 is very interesting. I want to show you this actually on the internet. We are born to believe. Oh, okay, I won't show you. I'll make another video on these. I'll show you at that time, because there's interesting research on this. And now I'm going to come more to the psychological aspect, you can say. And that is that number 12 is we're born to believe. Children believe in the unseen. Children believe in things that their 5 senses cannot be verified. This is why. Children will believe there's a monster under their bed, not because their parents told them, not because they were taught that, because it's just easier for them. They'll have imaginary friends. It's called active imagination in psychology. Children will believe in the unseen. It's almost we're born to believe. Actually, you know what? I am going to show you one aspect of this. Let me show you quickly, inshallah ta'ala. One aspect of this. Let's see if this comes up. In Justin, born to believe. So, born believers, the science of children's religious belief. Do you know that children can believe in the idea of Tawheed at the age of 3? It's innate. It's there. It's already there. Okay? Born believers, the science of children's belief. Okay? So children are born to believe. It's there. And then that leads me to the next argument, which is the anthropological argument of you could say, of history, which is that every civilization, every culture, every civilization, every, from the beginning of the history, from the drawings on the rocks and in the caves to where we are today. I mean, think of this. Every single culture has believed in the divine. Every single culture has believed in the divine. And so, man is obsessed. He cannot let go. He can't shake this off. Think of this. Hinduism, which is the most ridiculous religion to say that, I believe in cows as holy, and monkeys as holy, and other things as holy, and statues as holy, which science has completely destroyed. But yet Hinduism is on the rise in India against secularism. That's how much man needs religion. It's the opium of the masses because it is the opium of the masses because it's innate. Can't run from it. And so, every single civilization has had the belief in the divine. There has to be something there. So, you can now judge it in a scale of 1 to 10. Now, let me come to some other aspects that I found interesting. So that was number 13, anthropology. Okay. Number 14 is, if you're starving, which relates to this, but this is a separate argument. If you're starving, then there must be food. If you wonder why me, why am I here, who is there, where is, if you're wondering, it's like if you starve, then there is food. In the same way, if you search for God, search for the divine, something transcendent, we search for this in our stories, in our novels, in our movies, in our religious book. Man needs this. May the force be with you. We need this. We need this. It's innate in us. And so, if we need this, then it must exist. Number 15. This is psychological, which relates to number 14 in the sense that man needs meaningfulness in his life. Somehow, I don't know why, but people that believe in God cure themselves better, right? They have more, what we call well-being. They are better, in a better state of well-being. They're happier in their life. They have a more meaningful and purposeful life. So, if man needs something meaningful. Okay, I'll show you with this book that has been written on this subject that's extremely interesting, okay? Let me see if I can go. It's written by a Jewish guy. Meaningfulness Frankel, I think it is. Let's see. Amazon. Let's see if I can find it. Yep. This is the book. Man's Search for Meaning. Man needs meaning in life. Man needs something meaning more than himself. Something has to save us. Something has to protect us. Something has to give us meaning, a purpose. Something that gives us value beyond ourselves. Okay. This is innate in man. Okay? And the next argument is a very simple argument, which is the argument of Quran. If I still doubt, now remember, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I still doubt everything, I'm still not sure, I'm still in doubt, maybe there's God, maybe there's not God, after all, but if now there's a book coming to you, a book that's coming to you, confirming for you things of nature that could have not been confirmed at the time of the Prophet, أَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كَانَتْ. Do you not see the heavens and the earth were one, and then we broke them asunder? Do you not see we created from water every living thing? And all these phenomenons of nature, more than 200-300 ayat of Quran that have to directly or indirectly do with the phenomenon of creation. And then the miracles of Quran at the different levels, whether it is linguistic, whether it is scientific, whether it is, in philosophy, whether it is in psychology, the way the Quran understands human beings, right? Then that like re-emphasizes that even much more. La uqsimu bi yawm al-qiyamah. I swear there is a day of judgment. Wa la uqsimu bin nafs al-lawwama. And I swear by the soul that pricks you when you do something wrong. You feel bad when you do something wrong. Why is this there? It's there because there has to be some day of judgment. There has to be some accountability. Okay, if you still don't believe, لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بنفس اللوامة أيحسب الإنسان أن لن نجمع عظامه. Does man think we won't bring back his bones together? بلى قادرين على أن نسوي بنانا. But no, we'll bring back even your fingerprints. Now, what did Muhammad said this as just you think he just made this up as just an eloquent way of saying things? He will bring you back even بَلَا قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ. Even we'll fashion back your fingerprints. How could a man 1,400 years ago said that? How can a man 1,400 years talked about every living thing is created from water? How can a man have talked about the universe had a beginning with a big bang? Then the Quran comes after all these arguments. You have this argument where you're like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The Quran says this. How could have Muhammad known this? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I mean, he knew it because Quran told him. Now, I want to mention something interesting. And this is, so you can measure all the arguments on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay. But what I want to share with you here is something interesting, and that is that these atheists, when they talk about things without the concept of God, right? When they talk about things without the concept of God, you'll see over here this person, he says, oh, this is not divine, but then contradicts himself by using the word efficient. So watch now what he says. Okay, so I'm just going to put this back just a little bit. So, okay, now listen.
Seeds in sunflowers and pine cones always add up to Fibonacci numbers. Now, plants don't grow this way because they're receiving some kind of mysterious cosmic mandate. They're doing it because it's the most efficient way to pack as many seeds as possible into a small space. And if you want to see why that is...
So, if it's efficient, then it's not blind. And if it's not blind, then there's intelligence. And if there's intelligence, there has to be God. And the thing is that none of these people, from Richard Dawkins, I think his name is, to anybody I've ever heard, they'll just use the word nature or evolution or some other word to give it the qualities of God. Something intelligent that makes this happen. Okay? Somebody that knows what should have been done. So let's look at the next example. I'm just going to give a few of these examples, okay? So just watch from here now.
The final clue, a relationship between the environment and the reproduction of populations. Darwin reasoned that living beings compete over resources, and only the most fit for a given region survive. It's as if nature selects them, hence his choice of the term natural selection for the prime.
There you go. Nature selects them. Nature is just another word for God. Nature, something intelligent, selects them, just not a blind force. Otherwise, evolution wouldn't have taken place. In fact, we'll look at the very meaning of the word evolution. Here is something interesting. Okay, so he's talking about something here that has to do with, again, efficiency. Okay, the hexagon nature in code. So this person is making modules of living things, like a simulation, okay, of how living things are, okay? And so listen to what he says. Listen to what he says.
Here. So yeah, I've been working off camera on some creatures right there. I want to try and do something like hexagonal, I would say. So I was watching this documentary on Netflix called The Code. and they were talking about hexagons, how like nature incorporates like that geometric figure into like different structures, like beehives and some rocks in Ireland and a bunch of different things. So I wanted to try something like that for this creature, but I think I'm gonna start off with a four-legged thing. Let me just show.
So you see that? So now he's talking about how nature made a hexagon and how it's very efficient. That's not a blind process. You know, when we say nature did this, Mother Nature did this, you'll see this, okay? You'll see this again and again. I'll give you some examples of people talking about this stuff. But then, you know, so let's look at the very meaning of the word evolution.
The word evolution simply means change over time.
Evolution means change over time. But the issue is it change over time as a blind process? Or as an intelligent process? And if obviously it's an intelligent process. And if it's an intelligent process, you're just using the word evolution, nature, all these words, Mother Nature, you're using them in place of God. And so there is a contradiction of the language that's being used. And it is a language that is being used to confuse the people because you're just using, it's like, you know, kalimatun an mawadi'ihi, Quran says. They use and put another word in its place. Okay? Kalimatun an mawadi'ihi, like even the Prophet talks about they'll drink alcohol and give it another name. Right? So this is exactly what has been happening here. Okay? Let's look at the next example.
To him that these creatures had come from South America. They were obviously South American kinds of things, and not.
Now notice the words he uses: the word created, he uses the word change over time, you know, he uses these words that meaningfully only fit the meaning of God.
Not things that were for some reason created to go with volcanic islands, with volcanic rocks, which is what the existing theory of the day would have predicted, that living things were by some means created to suit the environment they lived in. Which is why, for example, when earlier eras of life were thought to have been swept away, perhaps they thought the Earth had changed so much that the earlier species, who were fixed within certain limits beyond which they could not change, when the environment changed too much for them, they died out. And some miraculous process created new life that fit the new environment. Well, here is a new environment, but the creatures living there are not created for volcanic islands. They're creatures like those in South America. How did they get there? Well, one theory was that they had all migrated independently, each from South America to each individual island. Now, Darwin could see that that's an absurd hypothesis. It's just ridiculous to think that every one of these birds or weeds had got all the way from South America only to one island. That can't be. So instead he thought, sorry, I think I just zapped somebody in the eye with a laser pointer. Instead, much simpler to think that a single migration process has happened to the islands of the Galapagos from South America, and then once in the islands, to migrate to other islands is a much simpler, more likely process. But somewhere in there, the only way this is recognizable, of course, was that they were different species on the different islands. So Darwin could see from all three of these kinds of information that clearly species must change over time. And the Galapagos was a particular...
So there you go. Again, the word created, you know, change over time. I mean, these are just, you're just substituting words for the word God. Okay, let's take one final example and then we'll make concluding remarks.
We come to the rather astounding conclusion that intelligence is not really necessary. That Mother Nature has done perfectly well with non-intelligent creatures for millions of years, and that we as intelligent creatures are the new kid on the block. And so
there you go, Mother Nature. So when it comes specifically to evolution, see, the thing is that you run into a few problems. For example, survival of the fittest didn't need us to have a voice box. None of the other animals have it. survival of the fittest didn't need to give human beings poetry and literature and the ability to read and to think and to look at the sky and to wonder about the sky and why we're here. Evolution didn't need to do that. And the other problem with evolution, there are two other problems with evolution. Number one, and I'm not against evolution per se, because لَا تَرْقَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. Evolution, to some degree, some aspects of evolution are confirmed in Quran. Evolution, if you take it in the sense that things went from one stage to the next stage. Yes, things went from one stage to the next stage, but not in a blind process. The essential difference is that some people are trying to take their observations and trying to say this happened in a blind process, and that to me is completely ridiculous. Okay, now what I was saying is that evolution, see, like for example the eye, right? Evolution couldn't have been just as a process that we had a half an eye. You can't do anything with a half an eye. It's not going to give you survival of the fittest, right? So you either had a whole eye or you didn't have an eye. And the eye is a very complex feature, a very complex organ. You can't have so many complex things all coming together randomly as just like one, like, just happened to be there. All these complex things, all the rods in the eyes, the optic of the eyes, the light of the lens of all of that coming together, or was it done phase by phase, as a lot of scientists say? So that's another aspect. The other aspect is that there is the chemical. So, for example, if you if you look at things not from an anatomical perspective, which evolution basically looks at the physical, how monkeys look close to human beings, kind of like that's the perspective there. But if you look at things from the perspective of that chemicals and hormones, right? One bird species cannot take the blood of another bird species. And the hormones in one bird to another bird are even so different. Forget about you cannot do transfusion of human blood into a monkey or a monkey into a human being, or take their hormones and put into our hormones. When you look at it from a microbiology perspective, evolution makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. No sense whatsoever. Because those similarities are the anatomical aspect of us. But at a microbiology level, we are completely different. So, here are the arguments I presented to you. You tell me which of them you like, which of them you don't like, which of them you find strong, which of them you don't find strong, and grade them on a scale of 1 to 10 so that I have a better understanding. As I'm doing da'wah in the world, it helps me. And it helps me understand which of the issues I need to grapple with as I continue to talk to other people. And then if you have other arguments, if you have other ideas that you think you need to share, please share it. And I will be definitely reading the comments and incorporating the ideas that I like from you into my arguments. And then I'll be making videos also on each of these arguments, separate videos, to make the argument more clear, more strong. And so we will be, inshallah ta'ala, doing that, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, inshallah. Make sure to subscribe today, and make sure you like, and make sure you leave your comments and ideas. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
أشهد أن لا